Hey guys, we are back with another guide, this time about the Scion version of Cast on Crit Ice Nova. The Scion is essentially the best all-rounder out of all the versions in the game right now, and has by far the most quality of life out of any of them. Now, I couldn't get all the gear I wanted this league as I work full time, so what you are seeing above is about 3/4 of the potential of this build. That being said, we still have a lot more defense and offense to get. However, due to the upcoming changes to Harvest, I've decided to release the video early. So when I'm talking about potential defensive and offensive layers, and they don't look like that in the recording, that is because I was unable to complete the version at this current time. Defensively, the Scion has access to Fortify for 20% less damage taken from hits, Vial Pack for twice as much leech, 3 Endurance Charges for 12% less physical damage taken and additional res, Wind Dancer for 20% less damage taken until hit, which pairs with our high mobility and dodge layers, Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics, Blind and Cannot Be Blinded Chest Piece, Chilling Presence with Aspect of the Spider for an AoE slow, Triple Balance Wise Oak for 10% reduced elemental damage taken and a Basalt Flask for a further 15% physical damage reduction, a high level cast when damage taken Steel Skin capable of soaking 2.4k incoming damage when procced, close to 7k EHP with min-max gear, stun immunity through dual implicits, better flask sustain through flask modifier on belt, and high mobility because we attack and move at the same time. We also have an additional curse that could be swapped into an Enfeeble or Temp Chains if more defense was desired. Offensively, there's not much to say aside from without even being min-maxed, we can do all content in the game, with most bosses only lasting a few seconds without needing any flask or Vial setups. As far as playing a build in PoE goes, very few are as comfortable as Cast on Crit Ice Nova. Most of our abilities are automated and we're capable of face tanking most hits in the game. With this particular version, there are also no map mods that are impossible for us, only the usual map mod pairings that can be deadly to just about every build out there. That being said, Cast on Crit is not without its drawbacks. It is a rather difficult build to optimize as there is a lot of moving parts you need to consider to get the balance just right. Due to the upcoming Harvest nerfs, I will not be going over any beginner versions of the build, and I will only be talking about the min-maxed version going forward. So we're going to start with the breakpoints, which is usually the hardest part for people to understand. So I'm going to take all the theory and all the guesswork out of it and just tell you exactly what you need. So you need 52% cooldown recovery. That's going to be at least 15% on your belt and 15% on your boots. And usually a level 5 Awakened Cast on Crit will give you the remaining 22% that's needed. After this, all you need to do is try and get above 9.1 attacks per second. Now, I know there is a bunch of theories out there, on how to get optimal novas per second and all this stuff, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is a waste of time to even worry about what they're saying. So here it is in a nutshell. I've already got the character in front of you, you can see the damage, so I'm just going to say, just copy my character at the end of the day. These guys have a whole bunch of unproven theories and a bunch of people that sit there and go, I got the correct attack speed, I've got a different one, it's also the correct attack speed. The only thing that matters is how does the damage actually look in game. If you're happy with the damage I've got and maybe you want to tweak the attack speed, go for it, but you can literally copy my build and you will have my damage. That's what it is at the end of the day, so don't worry about all the complicated stuff. All you need to remember is get 52% cooldown recovery and about 9.1 attacks per second, and maybe try and stay under like 10.10. However, all of this is pretty much covered for you in the gearing guide. So we're going to get started with that, starting with the Koshbreeze Malice. No surprises here, we're dual wielding Koshbreeze again. This is a mandatory unique and it automates our Frost Bomb, which allows us to debuff the enemy. And thanks to our Ascendancy, this is now minus 45 res in total, which is absolutely nuts for damage. Additionally, it also automates your Frost Bolts, which are capable of repeating your Ice Nova 2 times, which can shotgun, giving us insane single target and clear speed at the same time. So you need at least 2 Frost Bolts to do this, which we get through the double corruption. Now, if you lack the double corruption because they're extremely expensive, I recommend just putting in a GMP like I've done. The next item of note is the Blizzard Crown or the Helmet slot. Now, you guys have already heard me talk about this. This is essentially the item that has allowed us to take the build to the next level in terms of damage and allowed us to play pretty much any Ascendancy in the game reliably right now. Unfortunately, after this, you will no longer be able to craft this, so that's why we're only going to go over the min-maxed version. I recommend grabbing one of these if you can right now. If there's 2 items I could recommend people get, it would be the helmet and the chest piece. The helmet unlocks this build to all other Ascendancies. Without this, you cannot make the crit cap unless you want to play with Flask, and if you play with Flask, you're going to have a bad time. So another question I get asked all the time is why attack crit over spell crit, and the answer is pretty much Cyclone has lower base crit than Ice Nova, and Ice Nova doesn't proc Cyclone. Cyclone procs the Ice Nova. So if there's one thing you wanted to have 100%, it is your Cyclone. Also, if you look at our pathing on the tree, you'll notice that there is a whole bunch of spell crit and virtually no attack crit. Now, we've obviously hit the crit cap either way there, so there's not really an issue in the end. But I would rather have the attack crit than the spell crit is pretty much the TLDR. So the next item is the chest piece. Now this obviously is used to finish off our crit cap, which puts us at pretty much 100% the whole way across, aside from the spell, I believe. Now after that, it gives us frenzy charge on hit. Now not only is this damage, it's also attack speed. And it's actually attack speed that we then get to drop off the tree, which in turn gives us more damage again. So that's really, really good. We also additionally get the blind on the chest piece, which means that we can drop flesh and stone. And when we drop flesh and stone off the build, we can then add aspect of the spider, which is yet again an offensive and defensive increase. Now the good part about the blind on the chest piece is that its area of effect is actually larger than flesh and stone. And when elevated, also gives us another tag, which means that we can't be blinded, which is another defensive layer which we no longer have to worry about. And if all that wasn't good enough, just remember that you can also get a tier 1 life roll and an additional curse of your choice. Now in the video where you guys are watching me right now, I actually don't even have an additional curse. I haven't picked one. You could get one in the ring slot, and you can get one on the Command of the Pit corruption. I've been trying to get on the Command of the Pit. Unfortunately, there is very limited supply, and I'm also out of money, so we haven't even got that in the build right now. We don't even need it. However, I cannot wait to get one. It can be whatever curse you want. Enfeeble for defenses, Temp Chains for more slow, or it could be Elemental Weakness for more damage. Whatever one you think or want, put it in the build. Speaking of Command of the Pit, that is indeed our next item. Now, Command of the Pit, people sometimes say you can make a mirror tier pair of gloves that's going to be better than that. Going forward, that's also not even on the table, so I find it a very pointless argument at this point. But essentially, you cannot beat a Command of the Pit. It automates your Arcane Surge. You can get 2 double corruptions on it. It gives 6% flat life, which is already big. And the Abyss Jewels you put in it are capable of giving all res, which is fantastic for triple balancing our Wise Oak. It gives a whole bunch of flat, which you can't get, a whole bunch of multi, which you can't get, and pretty much just ends up being the best in slot, no matter which way I've POB'd it. Every single time Command of the Pit has come out on top. And now with Harvest Crafting being removed from the game, there's nothing, and I mean nothing in the game that will ever probably take Command of the Pit spot. I'm sorry, that is the way it is. Alrighty, the next item is the Sorcerer Boots. I get asked all the time, why Sorcerer Boots and not Two-Tone Boots? TLDR, because it makes it easier to triple balance your Wise Oak. You only get 3 res rolls in this whole entire build, and then the rest I just do through the jewels because it ends up being more point efficient. And if you get Two-Tone Boots, you then need to make up 1 res somewhere else randomly. And it's kind of annoying, it's like an extra thing you didn't need to do. Also, you get more defense. The enchant of choice is Damage Pen. This is a tremendous amount of damage on bosses. I recommend getting it. Tailwind obviously helps with all your attack speed. Your cooldown recovery rate is mandatory on this thing. And then just a life roll and cannot be frozen is something I like. We are playing around with cannot be chilled, or sorry, unaffected by chilled, the new Maven mod, which I will be testing out on standard at some point soon, and then I'll maybe add this to the build or not, depending on how I feel about it. Alrighty, so the amulet is the next slot, and essentially all we've changed on this thing is the accuracy rating. We swapped it from the helmet, and then we put it onto the amulet, and we still managed to reach our hit cap through this. Outside of that, in terms of point efficiency, Heart of Ice is still the best enchant, +1 levels are still the most effective things, we still need the Hatred Reserve, and then I just want life, because I have so much damage that all I want after a certain point is defenses. Now, when it comes to the rings, I pretty much just have 1 ring, which is just pure damage. Just got some crit multi on there, flat damage to spells. They're obviously essence crafted. The only thing I want is an open prefix for minus mana cost. The minus mana cost on both rings allows us to run no regen maps. That is a lot of quality of life. You'll probably never want to swap off this. I know a lot of people like getting pure damage, but then when they run a map and they're like, oh, I gotta go get my mana flask. No one wants to do that. Just make your build capable of doing absolutely everything and just do one of these rings. These are only like 20x to make, by the way. They're actually very easy to craft. I don't have a crafting guide for them. Harvest Crafting is leaving the game. I'll leave it to your imagination, or if you go watch some of the VODs, they'll be in there on how to do it. The only thing worth mentioning right now is the fact that we've swapped from Assassin's Mark to Frostbite. Now, they're very similar in damage. The difference is that Frostbite works on all mobs, which means when I'm doing Delirious farming, it's strictly better than the Assassin's Mark, which only procs on bosses, rares, and uniques. So I prefer Frostbite. It's the same damage. We have a lot of pen. It only gets better. Frostbite is my choice. After that, Aspect of the Spider, we get it on the ring slot because it makes the crafting process even easier. Alrighty, for the final gear slot. Now, it should be pretty obvious what it is. It's the belt. It's a Stygian Vice. Why? Because we get another jewel. Jewels are quite powerful. I prefer to run my belt slot completely defensively. So, for you, obviously, it's 2 res. and cooldown recovery rate. There is no exceptions here. This makes your triple balance Wise Oak super easy to attain. Outside of that, I want as much life as I can get, and a Hunter belt is capable of a lot of life. 118 and 12% maximum life is huge, and then there's one more modifier left. What would you want? You want 20% increased damage, which is kind of virtually nothing, or do you want this powerful modifier called Gain a Flash Charge when you deal a critical strike? We deal a lot of crit. This gives us a lot of flash charges outside of the flash charge cooldown. This has been doubled recently. This got buffed. This is twice as effective as it used to be, and it is noticeable in-game, especially on bosses when they're down for their immune phases. You can actually use that immune phase to then charge up more flash charges. It is really, really powerful. I don't know why people don't use it. I recommend this over anything else. 20% damage is not that much when you compare it to this modifier right here. Alrighty, so that is all your basic gear done. Now, outside of that, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get all your jewels. Now, your jewels are literally about 40% of your damage. Like, if you take them all off, you will literally nearly half your damage. They are weak against map mods. However, I still recommend that everyone gets as much crit multi as you can, so long as you've got enough penetration, enough flat damage, enough increased damage, enough more damage. You don't need to worry too much about it right now. It's all done for you on the POB, but essentially we've balanced it out so that if you do run one of those crit multi maps where they half your crit multi, you haven't got so much crit multi that your damage literally goes to nothing. Alrighty, now moving on to the most important thing you can get in the game, and that is your Watcher's Eye. Now, this thing is going to save you a heap of points further down the track, and that is your Watcher's Eye with the critical strike chance while affected by hatred. Pretty much mandatory in all my builds. I use this to reach my crit cap easily. There's no better source or bigger source of base crit in the game than this. Not even on the Assassin Ascendancy itself. This Watcher's Eye is literally invaluable. You cannot ever beat this. So, really glad this thing's in the game. I hope they don't ever get rid of it. That's the main priority right there. That's that. Outside of that, just the damage stats. That's all you want. There's a whole bunch of other combinations I would recommend. However, they are for different versions of the build. Pure damage is what we want on this one. Alrighty, moving on to the next most important thing, that is cluster jewels. Now, these things are actually probably more important than your crit multi. Getting these up and running is going to add so much consistency and damage to your build that it's not funny. So, obviously, we go with a large cluster with Blanketed in Snow, Doriani's Lesson, and Prismatic Heart. Now, Blanketed in Snow, 10% pen while chilled. We guarantee chill with one of our other cluster jewels. I'll get into that in a second. Doriani's Lesson is obviously damage plus leech. Now, we have no other source of leech in the game. This is how we get all of it. You've seen my leech in game right now. I'm pretty much always at cap. This pairs unbelievably well with our Vile Pact. A very, very powerful node indeed. Outside of that, obviously we have the Prismatic Heart. That gives us elemental res, which helps us with our gearing further down the track, and gives us elemental damage. Fantastic, not really much more to say about that one. Really good. If I had a choice for a suffix like I do in the POB, it would be for Chaos Res, which I actually have on standard, because Chaos Res is one of the few things we lack. Outside of that, I really wouldn't worry about it too much. Your next cluster jewel is a medium cluster. I call it the Unnerved cluster. It basically has Master of Fear and Wish for Death. Master of Fear is enemies you curse have unnerved. Unnerved is 10% more damage taken from spells. Wish for Death is obviously Culling Strike against cursed enemies. We curse on hit. We always have this up. The only other thing that's worth noting is the fact that we don't finish in a small cluster jewel. We prefer to finish with a jewel because it gives you more damage and more life overall and is more point efficient. Alright, the final jewel is the Chilling Cluster. Okay, so it gives you Chilling Presence, which means nearby enemies are chilled. You really, really want it this way because that means your enemies are chilled before you've even hit them, which means that you get all your crit chance before the first hit, which is exactly what you want. It also means that you're not weak against any Avoid Ailment maps. After that, you've got your choice between Cold Conduction and Storm Rider. So Storm Rider is kind of like a less consistent way to generate power charges, which means that you would get an extra slot free in your Cospreys. Or you can get Power Charge on crit to generate your power charges in your Cospreys. I put it on the Ice Nova because it's just extra damage at the end of the day. It's not super necessary. That's the way I would choose to do it if you wanted 100% consistency. Alright, so normally I would go on now to talk about the Ascendancy, the skill tree, and all the stuff that we've changed recently. I'm actually going to leave that all entirely to the POB. So this is actually our second time recording this. The software I was using to edit broke, and I put a lot of work into the first iteration, so the second one is unfortunately going to be done on a less powerful software that's a little bit more reliable. So it's a little bit less than what I wanted it to be, guys, and all the information is unfortunately going to be cut short. I don't really want to make too big of a video on it, and the real reason why I don't want to do another big video on this is pretty much because outside of this league, with the changes to harvest crafting coming, unfortunately this will only be for very, very rich players going forward. I don't know what they're going to do with the crafting going forward. I think we need some form of deterministic crafting regardless of whether it's from Harvest or as powerful as Harvest. We do need deterministic crafting in the game to make gear like this available, to actually open up for build diversity. And since that is not going to be the case, we are just going to push forward this build. People got one more month to create the gear and play it on standard. If not, you can always just mirror it off other people. I'll always have the gear there if someone wants to try it out. But ultimately, this build is essentially the last time you'll ever get to play this version. My finishing thoughts on it are that, Cast on Crit, and I've always said this before, is basically just one of my favorite all-rounders in the entire game. It's super comfortable to play. I've made it run all map mods. It now has the quality of life it needs. It now has the defenses. And I really, really enjoy this particular balanced version of it. It's a real shame going forward that that's not going to be available to everybody. But, if I had my choice of between this and, Assassin and Elementalist and all these other great versions out there, this one really does take the cake. It has better defenses than most of them, has better offenses, it has no map mod weaknesses. Like, people are going on about, oh, look how great the defenses are on the Inquisitor. I'm like, can it run Ellie Reflect? And pretty much the answer is no. Then it's like, what about no regen? No. At least it doesn't have, Flask Reliance, aside from for its block layer, which is its main defensive layer. Like, there's just, and not to mention, when you go CI, or low life in this particular case, it's like, you need ridiculously good gear. Ridiculously good gear isn't going to be available going forward. Therefore, versions like this are just obsolete. So we'll pretty much all just be going back to my old Assassin version after this. It'll still work, it's still great, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that, for me, Scion was really the new best balanced version. Assassin will still definitely be the highest damage version out there and still ridiculously well balanced and really obtainable in a league. But ultimately, versions like this are just so much better and really were the direction in which I was heading. So this probably won't be the last time I end up touching the build. I will probably keep building this on standard. I think I only have like the double corrupted Koshbreeze and the Command of the Pit to go. And then outside of that, I pretty much have all the gear I want. We're going to make the build a little bit better. We're going to have the damage-based versions if I ever get a one passive voices. There's still a bunch of projects I'm going to do, but they are just going to be, unfortunately, stuck on standard as far as it goes for now. And also, min-maxing probably won't be the goal of the channel anymore, or having different iterations. We're mostly going to focus on like budget to low end and just different builds going forward. Hopefully you guys appreciate the amount of work that went into this. I know it's probably not the ideal ending to the story that we wanted, but, this is out of my hands. This is GGG's doing, so like, subscribe, all that jazz if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Peace out. I'll catch you guys later.